Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Timothy McCall. I'm really happy to be here. Sorry if I'm starting a few minutes late. We've had some technical issues this morning. Uh, my my internet at home crashed, and so I'm having to suddenly set up a tripod and my phone and everything. And so anyway, here we are, we're ready to get going. We're going to talk about yoga and Ayurveda for immune function. How can we improve our immune function with yoga and Ayurveda? And questions I see up here at the bottom. Oh, okay, that's I have to put on my glasses with the small screen on the phone to read those. So we'll do the best we can with that. Any case, so part of what prompted my wanting to do this is that I have been, like many of you, been consuming a lot of information about COVID-19. I'm fascinated by this, and obviously everybody's freaked out, and it's natural that we're all spending time, or many of us are spending time really learning about this. Now, one thing that I was struck by when I watched various videos from cable channels interviewing physicians who were dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And the question that I saw three different doctors get asked on various cable TV news shows, stuff like that, was what can people at home do to boost their immunity? And the answer that all three conventional physicians gave was nothing. Nothing. There's nothing you can do. And of course, from a yogic and Ayurveda perspective, that's just silly. And actually, it turns out it's really also crazy, even from a standpoint of conventional medicine, because we know well that, for example, people who are chronically not sleeping well or not getting enough sleep impair their immunity. We know that people who eat a poor diet impair their immunity, and that certain foods may help with immune function. These are not really controversial things. Processed food, etc., according to yoga and Ayurveda, is kind of dead food, lacking prana, and that kind of food is probably not going to help you boost your immunity to a good level. At least that's what yoga and Ayurveda would say. Of course, fresh food, freshly cooked food, local food, organic food, food that from a yogic and Ayurvedic standpoint is higher in prana, is going to do a much better job at delivering antioxidants and vitamins, things that are certainly recognized in conventional medicine. So there's an overlap between the way that Ayurveda and yoga see diet and the way that conventional medicine sees it. But this emphasis on freshness, that is not found so much in conventional medicine. To conventional nutritional science, it seems that a peach that you pick right off the tree and eat fresh is the exact same thing as a peach that's been sitting in a jar or a can for a year. Now, of course, from a yogic and Ayurveda perspective, we view that as silly. It may have many of the same chemical constituents, but it doesn't have the prana of fresh food. So certainly that is one thing that we can all do. But I wanted to go a little more deeply into this and think about what else might be possible in doing what we can. Now, of course, a lot of what you do to boost immunity is a long-range process. So it's not just what we do today and yesterday, but what we've been doing for the past months. Now, we obviously can't change what we did for the past months if it hasn't been ideal from the standpoint of our immune function, but we can start to make changes now. We'll get some benefits now, and then over the weeks and even months, we'll get more benefits. And by the way, there's every chance that this pandemic is going to stretch on for months and months, that we may be able to dampen the curve, but there may be new activations that happen at later times in some places. And so I think there's reason to think that we're really going to want to have our immune systems as working as well as we can for the coming months. Now, let me talk a little bit about the immune system. It's a greatly complex series of processes involving different cells and different chemicals. And really, in conventional medicine, we talk about it as if we truly understand it. But there's a way that we really only have the most superficial knowledge. The complexity of it is far more than any scientist at this point fully comprehends. But we know basically that there are two major divisions in our immune system. There's the innate immune system, and there's the adaptive or specific immune system. The innate immune system, which consists of things like macrophages and other things that can inactivate viruses and bacteria, don't have to have any prior exposure to them to be effective. They simply recognize that this is potentially something that's putting out chemicals that signal it's an invader, that it's some kind of protein or something that comes off a bacteria or something that's generated by a virus. And they recognize this and they get activated and they go into action. Okay, so this is our innate immune system. And since we're talking here about a novel coronavirus, novel meaning new, meaning none of us have adaptive or specific immunity unless we got it in the last month or two. Nobody has antibodies to COVID-19, or nobody had it before a couple of months ago, because no one in the world had been exposed to it. And of course, there's no vaccine yet. So there's no way that you have antibodies. Now, antibodies may help you eventually in recovering to some degree, but it's really antibodies that you make at one time that then get activated at another time when you need it that are far more effective. So really here, what we're really wanting to do by and large is boost our innate immunity. Okay, now how do you boost your innate immunity? Again, according to conventional medicine, maybe they don't think there's that much you can do. But actually, we know regular exercise can boost your innate immunity. Stress reduction appears to boost your innate immunity, or all your immunity, really. And of course, the thing is, yoga and Ayurveda are really partially about lowering our levels of stress, balancing ourselves in various ways that make our whole system function better. Now, one of the lessons I have from yoga therapy is that the way we work on any specific function in the body, like the immune system, like the lower back, whatever it might be, is to work on the whole body and the whole being. Now, when I look at anything in yoga therapy, I have a model I call SNAPS, which stands for structure, nervous system, and breath, Ayurveda, psychology, and spirituality. So when I'm looking at any individual and looking at what I can do to improve their function, I'm going to want to look at all of those areas, because all of those areas affect the whole being. And when you affect the whole being, they can potentially affect any of the parts. So even if I don't have evidence that getting people to stop slouching, and hello to you if you just sat up more straight when I said that, to stop slouching, is that we know that that's going to impair the breath. We know that that's going to, or that slouching is going to impair the breath, and that sitting up more upright is going to improve the breath. We know that that's going to allow us to breathe more slowly and more into the base of our lungs. We know that's going to affect the autonomic nervous system, and we know that's going to affect the mind. And of course, it's going to affect the immune system, because all these different systems in the body are densely interconnected. So even though I'm talking today about improving immunity, I really want you to not forget that this is really about improving your balance overall. Now, of course, when it comes to Ayurveda, the major way that we talk about balance is to balance the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Now, at a time like this, when at a time like this, when I'm sorry, I'm getting messages are coming in and are blocking my screen. I'm sorry, I lost my thought there with those messages coming in. So at a time like this, when many of us are worried, perhaps not sleeping that well, feeling very restless and cooped up if we're, on house arrest, so to speak, it's going to tend to be vata that goes out of balance. So, and it's actually kind of an irony because in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, we're just transitioning from winter to spring. And we're theoretically moving into a more kapha time of year. And so many of the things you'll read and see about how to adjust your diet for this time of years will say to do things like eat a lot of bitter vegetables and things that naturally grow this time of year, because they will help keep the elevation of kapha, which may come with this season, down. But one of the principles of Ayurveda is that these rules, like what you eat in springtime, are rules of thumb. And sometimes in some individuals, they're not going to work. So if you're a person who is suffering from a lot of anxiety and a lot of insomnia or constipation, waking up, not being able to get back to sleep or not being able to fall asleep, these all can be a sign of a vata increase. And so actually, vata calming foods, which theoretically are just the opposite of what you want at this time of year, since vata and kapha are opposite in many regards, may be in fact just what we need. Things like well-cooked meals cooked with a good amount of healthy fat, things like ghee or coconut oil or olive oil or nice, healthy, high prana fats. These may be very useful. Cooked food may be better than raw food. And also cooked food, well-cooked food is easier to digest. And one of the things that happens when your vata goes out of whack is it can push your agni, your digestive fire, out of whack. Okay, so we really want to try to, if vata is what's going on, calm vata. If, on the other hand, we're finding ourselves getting really frustrated and angry, that may well be the vata pushing pitta and leading to that. So again, calming vata, but also working on calming pitta can be part of it. Now, some of this, of course, again, has to do with our nervous system and what is the level of our stress. And of course, not sleeping well is itself something that increases our stress. And yoga, of course, is a wonderful way, maybe the best system and the best collection of methods for changing our nervous system, moving from, of course, sympathetic activation to parasympathetic activation. Although, again, the nervous system is way more complex than that, and that is an oversimplification of what we're trying to do. But it's helpful to think of it that way. Okay, and now one of the things, though, is that if you're trying to do yoga and you're really kind of wired because you're stressed and you're worried and your vata is high, the tendency for many people is going to be to try to do very strong, vigorous practices, which can be fine and actually sometimes necessary at the beginning of a vata practice, a vata calming practice, to kind of burn off some of the psychological steam, so to speak. Help us get to the place where we can then start to relax. So you may have had the experience, if you've ever been very stressed out or kind of wired after some stressful event, that if you try to, for example, go lie over a bolster and just do a restorative pose, then it really doesn't go very well. That your mind is just too busy, you get restless, and you may get up in a few minutes from frustration. So now if you're really a deeply trained yogi and have done meditator and have done a lot of work like this, you may be able to work with those feelings and stay there even though part of you feels like getting up, and can actually lower your vata to do that, to go against the grain of inclination that wants you to get up and move when the vata is high, and instead to stay grounded and still and quiet yourself the best you can. But often a better way to do this is to first do something more active, something to, again, burn off some of the steam. And then after some minutes of a more vigorous practice, slowly start to titrate down, lower your level of intensity, and then the softer, more calming practices start to really take a deeper hold. And we actually know from studying the nervous system that just in general, that when you relax after first being stimulated, that works better than if you just try to relax straight away. And in periods of high stress and periods of high vata, that's even more. Now, what some people with long-standing vata derangements do is they kind of exercise or do yoga at a very vigorous level for a long period of time. And what they're doing is kind of exhausting themselves. So they get to a kind of a tamasic place where they can do something that feels like shavasana on some level. But that's really not what we're looking for. And the paradox is, if you're doing this really vigorous kind of practice, that you may find yourself more vata deranged the next day. So the super active practice can calm you temporarily, but then it has a rebound effect that leads to more agitation, more vata derangement in the hours after you finish the practice or the next day. So that's, short term may seem helpful, long term, not what you want to be doing. So I'd say max half your practice on strong stuff, then start moving to forward bends, twisting poses, slower breathing, potentially putting brief holds after the inhale and exhale. Calm the system down. Now, of course, another fabulous way to calm your nervous system down is pranayama. Now, pranayama is something that many yogis do not practice, and I believe it's a huge error. It's such a profound practice, such a profound way to change the nervous system and change the flow of prana, of life energy in the body. It's an unbelievably powerful system. Now, some of us have been taught that you have to have been doing yoga for a couple of years before you do pranayama. Now, that may be ideal, because the idea is you want to be able to sit up straight, to be able to do without a lot of effort, to be able to do pranayama and meditation well. But this is not a reason why even beginners can't do basic pranayama. One pranayama that I've been teaching beginners for years, and which is almost always something they can do, is mental alternate nostril breathing. So not using the fingers, although if you know how to use the fingers to block the nostrils, that's great and actually better in some ways. But there's a simple method that you can do at home, which is just imagining the flow of the air. I'll show it in a minute. And the beautiful thing about this practice is that you can do it covertly. So you can be socially distancing in line at the grocery store and feeling kind of freaked out. And you can do mental alternate nostril breathing, and you're not touching your face, which during this pandemic we want to try to avoid doing. And you're calming in your nervous system and balancing vata better, calming vata better. So basically what I suggest is you simply imagine inhaling through the left nostril, imagine exhaling through the right nostril, then inhale through the right nostril and exhale through the left. So in left, out right, in right, out left. And the amazing thing is that when you do that, when you put your mind on that request to your body does it. And if you've developed the sensitivity in your nose to feel where the breath is going, tune in when you try that. And I think you will notice that in fact the breath tends to follow the mind. And of course, this is one of the principles of yoga, that the prana follows the chitta. So a few minutes of alternate nostril breathing, one or more times a day. Now, the other beautiful thing about alternate nostril breathing, Nadi Shodhana, or mental Nadi Shodhana, is that it's the perfect setup for meditation. Because after you've done alternate nostril breathing for a few minutes, it tends to bring the breath equally to the two nostrils. That is said in yoga to open up the central channel, which is Sushumna, which facilitates going into meditation. And so what I often will teach to beginners is to simply do a couple of minutes of alternate nostril breathing, ideally at the end of an asana practice, because a well-sequenced asana practice will in turn set you up for pranayama, which then sets you up for meditation. So the point is a couple of minutes of Nadi Shodhana, mental or digital, followed by a few minutes of sitting with your eyes closed, simply following the breath as it moves in and out. Now, if agitation, if fear, if worry is a problem, then keeping your awareness down in your belly as you try to follow the breath in a meditative way can be more calming than keeping the focus up at the nose. Now, when your vata is really deranged, sometimes it's really hard to keep your awareness down in the belly. So do what you can do. If you're able to keep the focus down in the belly, that's best. If you find yourself going into a bunch of thoughts, that's really not working, then for now, just leave it with the nostrils. And again, noticing the air moving in the nostrils, noticing out the nostrils, notice what that feels like, notice the temperature, notice the humidity. Really tune in if you're tuning in at the nose, and if you're tuning in at the belly, just simply notice the belly gently pushing out with the inhalation. And then the muscles of the belly gently contracting, moving the spine a little flatter as you exhale. So either way, that can be a wonderful practice for calming vata. Now, I came across another interesting way that isn't strictly yoga or Ayurveda, though it's related to Ayurveda. I discovered this because of Ayurveda. So I just actually got back from India about 3 weeks ago. I was doing Ayurvedic treatments and other things that I do in India. And so one of the things I did is I brought back some lovely Ayurvedic oils from India. Now you can get these in the West as well, but I happen to have brought back some really nice ones from India. And so what I've been doing is about 4 times a week, I've been just putting an old towel on top of the toilet seat in the bathroom, closing the door, keeping the bathroom nice and warm, and then heating some of this oil, and then essentially doing a full body massage, just sitting on the back of the toilet seat and just staying there for say 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, letting the oil really soak in. Then I take a hot bath. Now in Ayurveda, the teaching is that usually they use steam in India. At home, I'm using a bath. That the oil moves deeper into the body when you do that. Can be more calming to the system, they say. And again, warm oil, particularly if it's the kind I have, which is based in sesame oil, is very calming to vata. But the thing I discovered about the nervous system is that raising the body temperature, even a few degrees, tends to boost innate immunity. Specifically, there's a type of white blood cell which is known as a monocyte. Monocyte is a precursor to the macrophages, which are part of the innate nervous system. Okay, and so when we take a hot bath, we raise monocyte levels, which theoretically then may help with macrophages and may help with immune function. And of course, viruses cause fever. And this is part of the innate immune system as well. This is helping us fight the virus. And so essentially a hot bath or anything else, hot tub, whatever else you can do to raise your core body temperature a few degrees. I'm talking Fahrenheit, but so not too high, but say 2 degrees centigrade max. Over your body temperature. That's enough to boost the immune function. Okay, and this is precisely what a virus does. And this is one reason why, though you may have heard recommendations to take ibuprofen or take Tylenol or take other of these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Tylenol is not an NSAID, but things like ibuprofen and naproxen, etc., are NSAIDs. These potentially lower fever, and I personally would not be taking these things because I feel like anything that's going to lower fever when the body's making it, unless you're just suffering terribly from a dangerously high fever, I would let it run its course, because that is part of how your immune system fights this infection or fights any other virus or thing that we don't have antibodies to already. Now, speaking of antibodies, and again, there will be some use, particularly later on in the period of time when you're infected, and in providing immunity, we hope, for future infections. And there's every reason to believe, like pretty much every other virus, coronavirus, COVID-19, is going to result in some boost in immunity due to antibody production. Okay, now there was a very interesting study done several years ago that looked at a bunch of high-tech workers at a firm, I believe it was in Madison, Wisconsin. And they basically taught them mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is a program designed by John Kabat-Zinn originally that combines mindfulness meditation, a kind of secular version of Buddhist vinyasa, what's the word I'm looking for? Mindfulness practice, anyway. Vipassana was the word I was looking for. So combines secular Vipassana with some yoga and other things to train mindfulness. And what they did was they had two groups. One group did the program and then was given an influenza vaccination. The other were on the wait list and just got the influenza vaccination and then would do the program later. And what they found was the people that did the MBSR program, who did the meditation, who did the yoga, wound up with higher antibody levels to influenza, more protection potentially against influenza by doing their yoga and meditation. Of course, meditation being part of yoga. So these things also can work on adaptive selective immunity as well. Okay, so let me just take a quick look at my notes and see if there's anything else I wanted to cover here. You know, in this time of Vata, and when many of us have lost the usual time anchors in our life, like having to go to work at a certain time or having to pick up the kids from school at a certain time, things that were kind of the anchors around which the rest of our schedule was grounded. Now, many of us have lost those anchors. And what can tend to happen is having an irregular schedule, staying up late some nights, maybe watching a lot of stuff on the internet, etc. Unfortunately, these are not good for Vata. We really want to try to go to bed at the same time every night. Try to eat our meals around the same time every day. It's so useful in a time like this to impose a regular schedule on yourself if you haven't been doing it. It can make a big difference. It can make your digestion be better because your Agni knows when you're eating and it can digest the meal better. You wind up with less toxicity, less ama, Ayurveda would teach. Now, the other thing is I think you really need to be careful, particularly in the evening, about screen time. And again, many of us feel like we're kind of stuck, but if you can, I personally, a couple hours before bed, I stop looking at the phone, I stop looking at the computer, and I give my nervous system some downtime. I give the melatonin in my body, which is naturally released, a time to increase when we want it to increase to help facilitate our sleeping well and through the night. Okay, so that is, another thing we can do. Try to do, if you can, your meditation and yoga practice, if you're doing them around the same time every day. Really try to get yourself and your family into a routine, because it really helps everyone if you can do this. Okay, so just basically trying, in other words, as Ayurveda teaches, to stay with the rhythms of nature. And that is ideally getting up by about 6 a.m., getting to bed by about 10 p.m., having our biggest meal of the day around noon, when the sun is at the high point in the sky. That's when our digestive fire, our Agni, is the best. So eat your big meal there. Now, the other thing, if you're sitting at home and kind of restless, you may have a tendency to be eating between meals. Ayurveda generally frowns on this, and particularly in the time period between dinner and breakfast. If you can possibly have nothing caloric in this time period, it's a great advantage, including to your immune system. And there's some interesting study done a few years ago that looked at women with early stage invasive breast cancer. And they looked at how long was the interval of fasting between dinner and breakfast. Okay, if it's more than 13 hours of nothing by mouth between dinner and breakfast, that group had a significantly lower rate of breast cancer recurrence. So this is about the immune system. So a long period of nightly fasting. I do 15 hours every night. As some of you may know, I had cancer a few years ago. So I'm doing this 15 hours every night as a way to boost my immune function. Okay, so I highly suggest you guys think about that. Now, longer term fasting, a day or more, can potentially boost immune function as well. In fact, the 2016 Nobel Prize went to the Japanese scientist who discovered what's known as autophagy, which is fasting-induced self-eating, which is what the Greek word autophagy means, self-eating. And basically what happens is your body cleans house. It gets rid of old senescent immune cells and generates new immune stem cells that it's like a kind of tune-up for your whole immune system when you do that. Now, the problem with long-term fasting is that it can exacerbate Vata. So these are the things you have to weigh. And if you're someone who doesn't have Vata arrangement and you want to put in a day a week, for example, of eating nothing, which I, by the way, do every Saturday, you can do it. But if your Vata is high, if you're showing those symptoms of high Vata, I would leave that for another time and stick with the simple overnight fast of 13 or more hours as the way to do it. Okay, so I think I've gone on for about a half an hour. And if people have questions, go ahead and start sending them in, and I'm happy to try to answer them. And I'm not seeing any questions so far. I did get some greetings in the beginning, but I haven't seen any questions. So anything else you want to know about the science of immunity, about yoga, about Ayurveda? By the way, I'll tell you, as long as you're waiting for questions to come in, I wrote a book about my journey through cancer, which is really a journey about increasing my immune function. Because post-chemotherapy, post-radiation therapy, my immune system was suppressed. Okay, I'm hearing there are some questions, but I am not seeing them. Let me see. Okay, let's see. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, in any case, that book that I wrote about how I boosted my immune system is called Saving My Neck. It's only available electronically in countries other than the States. In the States, it's also a hardcover book. Okay, so question one. This is so interesting. Here we go. If someone is burnt out with very little energy, and what there is easily depleted, what quality of foods would you suggest? Okay, so when someone is really burnt out, that means their immune system, that means their nervous system is kind of depleted. They can't do strong practices. It's just too much. So they need more calming practices. In terms of food, the burned out is probably going to be reflected in their digestive fire not being what it should be. But ideally, that's something you assess separately. But let's just say this. More easily digested foods are better. So well-cooked foods. I talked about having high-fat foods. You may want to have a little less fat if that's something that's proving hard for you to digest. I think you want to stay away from raw foods, and then again, concentrating most of your calories in the middle of the day, and that kind of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is the time period when they say that the pitta is highest and your agni is probably highest around noon. That tends to be the best time to do that. And then in terms of what kinds of foods, high prana foods, obviously fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, staying away from processed foods as much as possible. Of course, doing what you can in this period of time when you may not be able to get out and get all the foods that you like. Okay, question two. So with regard to heat, would you say Bikram yoga is a good practice? I've been practicing with an online group with my heating turned up, but I find it quite rigorous yoga as we complete the 26 poses in 60 minutes. Would you suggest doing asana yoga after? Okay, now, I don't know if doing Bikram yoga actually raises your core body temperature. So what I suggest that you do is perhaps, say halfway into your practice, get out a thermometer and actually measure your temperature. That would give you some indication about whether your core temperature is enough. I have tried it in a hot tub, and I found that I could actually, and again, I wrote about this in my book, Saving My Neck, that I could actually raise my temperature to almost 103 Fahrenheit. Just with hot water soaking. So Bikram yoga may do it, although water is probably a better vehicle for conveying heat than air. Although again, there may be a lot of humidity in a Bikram yoga studio, so that may in fact convey the heat. So check your temperature, then found out. I do think doing some kind of, then after that strong Bikram practice, doing something more like restorative poses, seated forward bends and twists, supine poses, very calming practices, restorative poses. I love Viparita Karani, legs up the wall, supported Bharadvajasana, wonderful supported poses where the props, the bolster, the straps, etc., are doing all the work. You just lie there. Okay, question three. What do you think about someone fasting for a week without food or drink? Okay, now this is of course out of the realm of Ayurveda, which does not recommend such long fasting. And such long fasting can certainly be a problem for some people. Someone who has a lot of kapha in their nature may be able to tolerate long fasting better than other people. I do think that there's some scientific reason to think, although not demonstrated in clinical studies, that longer fasts may have more profound effects on the nervous system by keeping yourself in a state of ketosis, which then also seems to promote autophagy when you do these longer fasts. And so the scientist who is kind of most known for this fasting and boosting immune function is a scientist from Boston College. And he recommends a 4 to 7 day fast that everyone do every year. Now, he's not a physician. He doesn't do it himself. I personally have done 4-day fasts followed by 3 days of ketogenic diet. Now, a ketogenic diet is a moderate protein, very low carbohydrate, high fat diet, which I'm a vegetarian pretty much, and that is tough to do long term. So I find I can do it for 3 days, but then after that I go kind of crazy. So what I have done is combine 4 days of fasting with, which is not for everybody. And by the way, if you're underweight, if you're depleted, you've got profound vata derangement, don't do a 4-day fast. It's way too much. In fact, people who are depleted or frail or very, very thin probably shouldn't be fasting at all other than overnight. Okay. So I just got the message that we're running out of time. Thank you all so much. You can find me at drmccall.com, drmccall.com. You can find me. I've got a YouTube channel called Ask the Yoga Doctor. So either at drmccall.com or Ask the Yoga Doctor or Facebook, whatever. Hope to see you in the future. Thanks so much. Namaste. Stay mighty. Stay healthy.